Maureen, don't snitch on me, okay? Whatever I say today stays in this room. Okay, I'm just going to set a little, so I will ask if somebody can give me a 5-minute time check at 25 minutes in. That would be very helpful, and that's with a ding, a punch or something, okay? Thank you. Maureen, you can do that. Okay, so my name is Rabia Khedr. I often have a one-liner that I choose to introduce myself with rather than the formal bio. And that goes something like this. I'm a hyphen with many hijabs. I am a Muslim, Punjabi, Pakistani, Canadian woman, wife, mother, daughter of aging parents, mother to kids, actually 4 adults now, who are, not just Pakistani. They're actually Pakistani and Egyptian. So, they're even further confused with their identity and complexities of their identity markers. And daughter of aging parents, sibling of individuals with disabilities, activist, advocate. I've adopted some white privilege terms over the last couple of years. I used to say I'm a shit disturber, but now I say that I am a systems disruptor and social entrepreneur. And I have a PhD in PS. So I'm the entertainment part of this conference. No, I'm joking. I have some serious stuff to say, and I will get to it. Unfortunately, I'm supposed to share the stage with somebody who wasn't able to make it today, so I have more time to babble, and I do babble. So first off, let me ask, I'm seeking the views and opinions expressed by me are solely mine and not any organization affiliated with me, nor friends, nor family, nor the folks who invited me here today. And I'm grateful for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving me the ability to express and speak and articulate views and opinions of mine and of those who share lived experience with me who cannot express for themselves for whatever reason. I am eternally grateful. I express gratitude for that, but I also seek forgiveness. First from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if I say anything wrong, and then from anybody here if I say anything that offends, harms, causes conflict or discomfort for you. No, actually, if it causes discomfort, it's okay, because I'm supposed to be uncomfortable.
Yes.
Okay? You are supposed to be uncomfortable.
Yes.
So, I gave you my one-liner introduction. You got my formal bio. I am 56 years old now. I'm really not about what I say or do, but I like to speak truth to power. And I always say, I don't waste time seeing, I spend time doing. And doing because I'm not pressured with all the extra noise and garbage that everybody else is forced to see and have to live up to. But that doesn't mean that I've been immune to social standards. That doesn't mean that I haven't wanted to quote-unquote whiten up and fit in, right? We all have had that journey, and we get to a place where it's no longer about needing to fit in, but it's about take me as I am. So I'm going to do a little bit of storytelling around this. I'm going to talk about some key principles, and hopefully I can leave you with something good for the further conversation that we're also going to have on the panel. So for me, I was an immigrant child, like many of the women that spoke on the panel this morning, many of the individuals that spoke this morning. And as that immigrant child, I ended up with trials and triumphs, making my way through an undergraduate degree in the early 90s. And at that time, we had Gulf War I, we had Somalia, we had the Bosnian War. Bosnians that I didn't know existed, let alone were Muslim. And I was, a poli-sci major and sitting there through these lectures, listening to the rhetoric, listening and watching media, feeling really like, oh my God, what is this world? Studying also human resources related courses at the same time, planning a career in HR, I felt like the world is supposed to equity-based, and I'm going to be in for a reality check. So I had this journey of figuring out who I am, and along that way, I decided the day I graduated from Convocation Hall at U of T was the day that I was going to start wearing a hijab, because the world saw me as a brown, blind woman. You know, I have a cane that I used to creep out sometimes in unfamiliar settings, so, you know, my blindness was visible. My brownness was visible, being a woman was quite visible. I wanted the world to recognize me as Muslim first because of what was happening politically. I always felt that I needed to wear a hijab. I didn't do it, but I found myself needing to politically express myself because it was like, in your face, Canada, I'm Muslim too. It's not somebody else over there. So I feel compelled to like face that way, guys. Help me out here with the visuals, like, because I hear everybody from over there, and I hear everybody over here. So the parts that's active, because they keep on wanting to look where they're noisy. Okay. So then, you know, I went out into the world, and I quickly discovered that merit didn't exist. And I had to be that token, take on token opportunities, but I don't ever expect me to behave like a token, as many people have learned the hard way. So sometimes those performative acts are necessary to help us get it. Sometimes those token gestures are necessary to open a door. But what it really takes is that next leap through performative actions to transform systems. And we have had some strides. You know, we had people with disabilities in this country that were institutionalized, not to compare in any way, but not a little different than residential schools, but, you know, again, similar at many levels. That level of exclusion where we needed to hide people. In fact, we had eugenics policies in this country that Hitler studied, and the first victims of the Holocaust were 200,000 disabled people that we often forget. Out of World War II, there was an awakening. We had bills of rights, human rights, bits and pieces across the country and in the province. In 1962, emerged the Ontario Human Rights Code, eventually recognizing disability as a prohibited ground for discrimination. Our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we have been fought for disability to be included in the equality provisions. People with this, so women's rights were recognized, the rights of faith communities were recognized, eventually race was recognized, disability was kind of last to be recognized. And then we had to fight even more. We had to fight for deinstitutionalization, to live in the community. Forget about working, just to live in the community. And that journey continues because people are still being re-institutionalized at many levels, my latest battle being a group home just in the West End here. We then fought for legislation. So there's accessibility legislation in place that has standards, and somebody referenced those standards this morning. You know, physical accessibility, technological, digital. So in the area of information and communications, in the area of accessible customer service, the built environment, employment, education, etc. So standards through the AODA in Ontario and federally through the Accessible Canada Act, and then we have international obligations under the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. And you know, so and the Covenant on Social, Cultural, and Economic Rights. A lot of law, a lot of discussion, a lot of policy formation, but there's still something missing. And what's missing is where my journey in this space began in the community through Ethno-Racial People with Disabilities Coalition of Ontario that still struggles to exist, ERDCO. ERDCO was founded in the mid-90s, and one of its founders and my dear mentor passed away like a month ago. And, we were doing work around intersectionality before that word became a buzzword, before we discovered who Kimberly Crenshaw was, talking about intersectionality. But, way back then, there was a group of friends that got together at Toronto City Hall. And they got together just to share experiences. They came from different parts of the world. They were minorities with disabilities. They were racialized people with disabilities. One day, one of them said, I lost my job. And they said, what do you mean? What happened? She asked for accommodation related to her hearing loss, and she was ridiculed. She asked for accommodation to do her worship, her puja, in the Hindu tradition. And she was told to do that in the bathroom. She asked for some other accommodation. She was harassed as a woman. And then ultimately she was fired. So she relayed this conversation to my late friend Rabia and a couple of other friends. And they said, you can't let them get away with this. You have to do something about it. And so she was encouraged to go to a disability legal clinic. And that disability legal clinic said it's not a disability issue, it's a women's issue. The women's organization said it's not a women's issue, it's a cultural issue. The Cultural Settlement Agency said, no, it's not, it's labor. And the cycle continued. She found no support. So ERDCO was born in protest of the organizations that refused to serve her. And the conversation around intersectionality started without it being known as such. So we have these identities that we bring. We bring our lived experience to the accessibility conversation. And really, it is IDEA: inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. But because there's this whole legislated obligation around accessibility planning, organizations tend to compartmentalize accessibility over there away from all their EDI work, and never shall the two meet. That's not the reality of our lives. My life isn't just about the accessibility plan. It's about me being a Muslim woman who's South Asian, who's Pakistani, who's whatever label you want to add to my experience of living my life and bringing that life into work. So I never found that sense of belonging in work, so I carved out my own spaces where I could belong and have impact. So in the national advocacy space, I found myself dabbling in there over 20 years ago and didn't feel that I was heard because I wasn't everybody's drinking buddy. I wasn't, happy with just cheese and crackers. I needed a little more. I needed my samosa and falafels and whatever. That's mainstream today, by the way, right? It's mainstream today. So things have changed since I was in little school and the teacher said, I can pick off the pepperoni off the pizza for you. And I said, I really want that pizza, but I don't think that's halal. So things have changed, but many things remain the same. So I took an inward journey and established organizations. I sat on boards and committees. I made my own space to advocate and contribute. And then came 2020. And in 2020, even before 2020, I went into the national disability space again because I needed resources for the work that I was doing locally through the various channels. And I was encouraged by people in positions of power, like the late David C. Onley, Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, who was a near and dear friend, who sought my advice on issues of culture and spirituality and disability. And he encouraged me to build relationships. I built those relationships and I found myself attending a session because I said I was sick and tired of two white able-bodied men dominating the disability discourse in this country. Maureen, don't snitch on me, okay? Whatever I say today stays in this room.
I'm up next, Rabia.
I ended up then getting invited to a session where I ended up asking an intern from the minister's office anybody, I said, do you speak any other language, like Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi? She goes, yeah, Hindi, Urdu. I said, koi hai hamare rang ka is kamare mein? Right? Like, is there anybody in our color in this room? She said, just you and me. And we were having a conversation about culture change. And I said, how can we have a conversation about culture change without representation from multicultural communities? Because representation does matter. It's often token, but it matters. And I can't be the single token at the table. Well, I continued being that single token in 2020 when there was a national disability advisory group set up by the minister responsible for disability that Maureen and I met at. And I love Maureen dearly because she gets me and understands and all that kind of stuff. It's about sharing power, but I was the only colored person on an advisory group of 12 people in this country, representing the 27% of disabled people in this country who are maybe 50% minorities. So the advocacy space, the equity space, still does not embrace intersectionality the way people with disabilities from diverse communities need it to. The work cannot be done without us at the table. As many minority politicians have said, if you are not at the table, you're on the menu. So there are decisions being made about us without us. And that doesn't foster the climate of accessibility that we need. That does not meet the goal of inclusion. That does not justify equity. So, contact somebody?
You're sitting at 5 minutes.
5 minutes, thank you. Okay. So in terms of creating spaces and places of belonging, I talked about 2020, and in 2020, because of my experience and connections in that national space, so to date I had formed Canadian Association of Muslims with Disabilities, DEEN Support Services, an organization of just all families called Opportunities Mississauga for 21 plus for folks with intellectual disabilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Chaired the City of Mississauga's Accessibility Committee for many years. You know, dared to hold positions of power. And in that journey, I finally, when I said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, I even decided to run for city council because I could, and I felt I needed to in order to take the work that I'm doing at a grassroots level to have more impact. I'm proud to say that on a list of 26 candidates, I was the only woman until 2 other women popped up last minute and got 10 votes each. And I came 5th behind 4 able-bodied white men that had a lot of political material and data behind them. So that was an accomplishment. It was fun. But so in 2020, I met a gentleman that I had met 20 years before and had no use for because I felt we had nothing in common. And he probably knows that I go behind his back saying this. Alan Mansky from Planned Lifetime Advocacy Network, who was a parent of a child with an intellectual disability. So when I met him in the early 2000s, I was like, I have nothing in common with this guy. He doesn't know what my parents live. He has, he's building this stuff that's for privileged people. He doesn't understand. So, there was a disconnect. But when I met him in 2020, I was like, why didn't I hang out with this guy? Because I could have learned so much more. But in 2020, he stepped up to share his privilege and power with me. He invited me in to host some webinars to build some understanding around the Canada Disability Benefit journey. The Canada Disability Benefit was promised by the former Trudeau government. And so we started to mobilize around that, and Disability Without Poverty was formed, and I was installed as its national director with a lot of resources that only a white privileged man could mobilize. And because I had the power to manage those resources, I was able to put in the supports that I need to do the work that I needed to do best. I'm not good with spreadsheets. I can hardly navigate them with a voiceover. But there are things that I do well. And that's where Sabrina comes in, does all the spreadsheets. No, I'm kidding. That's a lot more than that.
Way to go, Sabrina.
So Sabrina is my director of operations here at DWP, and she's just awesome, and she's just coming to hang out with me today to see, what else I do. So Al opened that door, got the resources, I got in the door, I started to build those relationships, and I hope I outdid his expectations because we did mobilize, we did collaborate, we built allyship, and we got legislation through the finish line, and we got a benefit that's not good enough, but the conversation and advocacy efforts continue to improve the benefit to lift disabled people out of poverty. So lived experience is central to any work that is to impact systemic change, and that includes any work in the EDI space that wants to be fully inclusive. There cannot be anything without us. Accessibility goes hand in hand with equity, diversity, and inclusion. And it can only be achieved if we center lived experience. And it's never about we deserve equity. We demand equity. We have been denied equity. So language is also very critical. We are not equity deserving communities, folks. We're not waiting for somebody to give us a handout because we deserve it. No, we demand it. We have been denied it. We have been kept out long enough, and we are fighting to make it happen. We are active participants. Nothing about us without us. Thank you.